Hi there, I'm Alex, sound designer for Aftertouch Audio's master gun library, and I guess I'm making this video because I wanted to show off the method that I developed for sort of mimicking game audio gunfire within Reaper. The whole idea was, I wanted it to sound like Call of Duty gunfire. But anyways, just a little bit about the library. It is the largest gun library just out there on the market. It's a big library, so I don't have designed assets for all of these yet. I'm working through it, and we're continually adding more and more to these. But anyways, typically in designed assets for a library, you would just drag in a bunch of the different perspectives. So say this is like your 5 foot, your 15 foot, your 50 foot, and you would just process them in different ways. But that tends to sound like kind of lame for automatic firing because, in games, it sounds really nice and full because you have the tail assets that layer over each other. It just sounds really pleasant to me, the way they do it in Call of Duty. So what I tried to do with these designs is I would design mech, shot, tail, and like a different kind of atmospheric layer. And I'm not going to be doing that for the purpose of this tutorial. But basically what I would do is I would design, I make a bunch of different mech sounds, a bunch of different shot sounds, a bunch of different tail sounds. Try and split it up. And just like in a game, for the different shots, you play one mech, one shot, one tail. Right? And then that allows you to randomize the pitch of each one of these, delay them by a certain amount, like that. You just have a lot of control. And, you can just add a pitch offset to any one of these layers, and it makes a really big difference in how it sounds. That's what I found. So to me, I feel like layering the one-shots sounds so much better than simply layering perspectives and processing them a little bit differently. So anyways, I found a method to do that, and I wanted to share it. I do have a written tutorial on my website, but I felt I should make this video just because it'd be a little bit easier to follow. As you can see in the written guide, there are a few, prerequisite Reaper extensions you're probably going to need. It makes it a lot easier. I use this MK slicer tool, and that's going to be what we use in this tutorial. Basically, we're going to use this to chop up our assets, our long series of one-shots, into individual MIDI notes. Another device I'm going to be using in this tutorial is the Paranormal FX browser. It just makes it really easy. And then lastly, you're going to need to import my repository into your repack to use my devices. And so just to give you a good idea of what you can do with this setup, and one of my designs in the Aftertouch audio library that I just finished up, this is an example of some of the stuff you can do with it. And so as you can see in this project, I have a bunch of little slices. Each of these are sub-projects, these 4 tracks here. Within these sub-projects, we have just a bunch of, one-shots, really. As you can see, just a bunch of one-shots. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking these long series of one-shots, we're going to be slicing them up and triggering them based on either the MIDI click tool or transient detection. And so the first step is to design your one-shots, right? So let's just do that. And so I think with that we can start putting these into sub-projects after I just make sure I clip this. Okay. Okay, so we have our 3 just long sub-projects here. Now it's time to actually turn them into MIDI that we can play and trigger and all that. What I tend to do is, since I have an audio like this, I use the MK slicer here. And what this will do is you can mess with these threshold and retrigger settings. And if adjusting those doesn't quite get it to one slice per like chunk, then you can right click on one of these orange markers and that'll get rid of it too. We've got it one shot per slice, so we're just going to hit the MIDI button here. And what this is going to do is it's going to turn every slice into a note within a resample-matic container. And so that'll look like this in the Paranormal FX browser. So we're just going to do that for every single one of these. So now we have our 3 containers of slices. What we're going to do is we're going to make a new track and paste them. Boom. There's the mech. Here's the shot. We're going to put it right there. And here's the tail. We can rename them just like this. So we're going to put an instance of this, the MIDI processor, before all of the containers. We need to make sure that the output of the MIDI processor is the same as the range of these sampler instances. So as you can see, this is the first shot here. It starts at MIDI note 25 and ends at MIDI note 40. So this range actually will do just fine. It's 25 to 36. We're cutting out 4 notes. I think it'll sound fine. So I'm just going to take this, put it there. And so now finally we need to trigger these slices, and we can do that through either taking one of the muzzle mics or something, or you can also do it with the mouse clicker. Yes. But it sounds kind of bad right now, doesn't it? So I think we need to lower the volume of all these. And what I also find helps is delaying the shot layer. So we can just add a delay. Perfect. Okay, you want to turn down the dry. Turn on the feedback. 0. Then yeah, I mean, I find something like that helps. And then I also like delaying the shot layer as well. I usually like about, I don't know, 60 milliseconds. Let's see how that sounds. And so it still sounds quite messy, but that's because the tail layer is playing pretty constantly. So a little bit about the processor. So within the device, you can see 4 sliders for the velocity controls. And what happens in this device, I wanted the ability to ramp the velocity of one of these layers over the entire like magazine dump and stuff. So what we're able to do is we're able to start at a higher velocity and ramp down kind of logarithmically like this. And that's controlled by the burst final velocity, this slider here. So as you can see, you know, we turned it down to like 43 or something. You're going to see this ramp down over the period of like 1.12 seconds. So it's already sounding quite a bit cleaner. We can also do that with the mech, which is something I like doing. We can, you know, turn the mech down or something. But so the cool thing about this setup, you know, if you don't like how it sounds, is we can go in each of these, make some changes to the subprojects, and any changes we make to the subprojects, we can refresh the project and the changes will be reflected in these containers. We won't have to redo any of the slicing or the importing, it'll just work. So I have that refresh action, and what that does is it just turns all the FX and project media offline, then back online, and that loads everything. And so that will refresh the dependencies of these. So I'm going to make some changes to the sub-projects so that sounds better, and then we're going to refresh. It's going to sound better. Okay, so I've gone through, I've refreshed the assets a little bit, you know, I've made them sound a little better. I didn't change the mech a lot, but I did make some pretty significant changes to the shot and tail. So this is what the shot sounds like now. And this is the tail. Gonna refresh it again. You can hear that tail does, you know, you can hear the new tail. Change the pitch of the shot. Already sounds quite nice. Maybe make the tail take a little bit longer to reach the bottom velocity. A little bit more delay too. Or less delay. And so yeah, this produces Gunfire and Reaper that sounds much fuller, much, I don't know, just much better. Or hell, you can even like duck down the shot. Just keep more of the mech, you know? Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, that needs to be louder for sure. Yeah, sounds nice. A little bit more of that. It does also have pitch randomization, as you can see there. You know, you can make it all crazy. I'm just gonna sit here and mess with it a bunch. More fun when it's like this, you know, because you can much more immediately make differences to the sound. It's pretty cool. Getting a crazy amount of delay to the shot, for example. I don't know. There's a lot you can do. Where's my tail there? Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna add a little bit more beef to the shot layer, and then I think we'll call this gun done. Alright, so now the shot layer's got some healthy sub to it. Doesn't look like a lot down there, but you're gonna hear it whenever it's repeated so much, you know, so. So now, might be a bit too loud. I'd say that's pretty much perfect. So yeah, that's the process of actually building the template and, you know, the general workflow of it. But I'd like to show you some of the ways that I prepare these assets in the final mixes for the library sounds. What I tend to do is I've got the muzzle mic here. I forgot I didn't actually follow through with that. What I tend to do is I use Reaper Gate. The Reaper Gate has a tool where it'll have a MIDI on once the signal surpasses the threshold of the gate, and then it sends a MIDI off once it falls below. So I just use that to perfectly sync the triggers to the actual like shot events in the recording. So here's how that sounds. So yeah, there we go. Now it's perfectly synced up to how Aaron shot these. So I want to use this at some point for like actual sync audio, where, you know, if a character's shooting a gun on screen, I just have perfectly auto-assembling, you know, gun sounds that just design themselves, and all I need to do is place clicks that sync to muzzle flashes on screen. So that's another thing you could do with this. I haven't done it yet, but I think that'd be a pretty cool use case. And then finally, you can use this workflow for whenever you're designing assets for a game, right? So this is how I tend to prepare them for just individualized renders. I will slice them in the same way that I did for the MIDI containers. Boom. And then what I like to do is I like to take everything and just reduce the length of it. Boom. You can have the mech be really tiny or something. Perfect. All right, so now what you're gonna want to do, you're gonna want to make sure these aren't muted, because we're going to be using the batch converter. You're gonna want to name all of your tracks. All right, now that we've named our tracks, we can add these to the batch converter. Boom. And I'm just going to use my desktop, I guess. Okay, and so what you can do is you can use the wildcards to then name these assets whatever you want. You know, if you have this saved in a project that corresponds to the gun model name or the in-game name of the gun, you can use the wildcards to then do it. But I just have it set to the track wildcard for this demonstration. So as you can see, it's going to render, you know, mech 0 to mech 16, shot 0 to 16, tail 0 to 16, you know, and then you just do it. And so now, if we check my desktop, boom. There's all your assets. Perfect. What I tend to do for the Aftertouch renders, it tends to be me just going through rendering, you know, rendering the master, just the entire project, and I'll just render a few different variations after I've, you know, I'll render the default, everything's set to normal. I'll go through maybe like, you know, lower the pitch of the shot and the mech even more. I'll just do whatever sounds cool. And I'll render 2, 3, 4, sometimes of just different configurations of this, and that is what is delivered to customers of the Aftertouch Audio Master Gun Library, the designed assets. I was editing the recording and I realized I didn't actually do an outro, so here it is. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you know, you follow the process and can find a way to employ it. And you know, I think it'd be really useful for like game audio, especially. Whenever I was working on Dead Drop like 2 years ago, I would always design gun assets and implement them in Unreal, and it would never quite sound how I thought it would in my head, and that would cause me to make a lot more iterations. Like it just make the process like 3 times as long. It was really annoying. And with this, the DAW and the engine are bridged because you can actually hear what it would sound like implemented, you know, or like a rough kind of estimation of how it would. Or you can just test parameters for your engine implementation, you know, the shot and tail delays. Anyways, I hope you got some use out of it. I'm going to put my email up on the screen if you have any questions, you know, if you have any problems or I didn't explain something in the video correctly, or maybe even employment opportunities, right? I'm looking. So yeah, happy 2026, guys. See ya.